In 1844, a woman by the name of Dorothea Dix, who was a strong advocate for the mentally ill, vividly described the treatment that the mentally ill persons were going through in the state of New Jersey. The state's treatment of the mentally disabled were horrendous. They were being housed in county jails, private homes, and basements of public buildings. Due to her efforts, the first complete asylum was built on the Kirkbride Plan, an architectural floor plan where on both sides of the central building was two long wing-like shapes to them. This was meant to aid the mentally ill with comfortability, natural sunlight, fresh air, and lots of space for the patients so that way they can feel as if they have a bit of privacy. This very same asylum would go on to do the exact opposite, catering a history to their patients, running barbaric experiments on them, and pretty much becoming the poster boy of examples of how our mental health system let so many of us down during this time period. Now being known as one of the worst mental institutions and is notoriously known as the Madhouse. As you can already tell, here on this channel we do not shy away from serious topics, and I notice more times than not that I actually gravitate towards the mental issues that many may not be aware of. We talk about depression, we talk about survivor's guilt, the process of grief, but I think most impactfully, we spoke on the mental institution's horrid history. Practices that were once used on patients such as electroconvulsive therapy, isolations, mind-altering drugs, and much, much more. But another thing I noticed is that the topics were only brought up due to a video game by the name of Rambo. And to add yet another variable, it was in the lens of a 12-year-old child who had no other options other than to be there. However, today I want to focus on a different perspective. I want to focus on who society deemed as defective and socially forced them to omit themselves into such facilities. Today, I want to talk about a movie and a book called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Let's get into it. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was written by Ken Kinsley in 1962. The story is narrated by a giant half-Native American who presents himself as mute, deaf, and docile, but in reality is totally sane, or mostly sane. He's a bit delusional, but we'll get more into it. He narrates about a patient named Randle McMurphy, who got in trouble with the law and faked his insanity so he could serve out his time within the mental institution, but quickly gets into a feud regarding the head nurse, which creates a power struggle for the duration of the story. If you are interested, please grab your snacks, sit back, relax, and it's actually going to be a really, really good and interesting video just because I absolutely love and adored this movie, and I absolutely love and adored the book as well. Alright, hey guys, quick notice before getting into the video. This is going to be a re-upload. I came up with this video about a week ago, released it, it was good for 3 days, and when I tell you the entire video got copyrighted after I was done taking out all the copyrighted parts, it was literally a 24-minute, and for contrast it was an hour-long video, so I thought it would be just a better idea to just re-upload it to its fullest capacity where nothing gets copyright striked. The reason why I got copyright strike was because Warner Brothers didn't like that I was using the videos. Even if I was making it transformative, it wasn't enough. So I'm going to re-record literally everything, and you're gonna have to see my beautiful face for half the video. So if that's not something you're interested in seeing, then click off the video. But if you are interested in just hearing me yap talk, it'll be a very good study video for you. So let's get right into it, and let's go. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is that not everything in the video was copyrighted, so it will jump back before me, or it'll drop back to past me, and then I will come back in and be present me for more than half of the video, and then when it comes to the yap session from the past, then I'll let you know. But yeah, so if the audio was a little weird, it's because the audio was a certain way back then. I'm trying to replicate it, but if I can't, I'm sorry. But now let's get into the video. So the movie begins with a long shot of a car making its way down the road. We don't know who it is in the car just yet, but this will become a very common shooting practice that I noticed early on in the movie that it likes to do. It likes to take these long shots, and I feel like it's supposed to keep you in suspense. It's supposed to keep you confused, suspecting, and most importantly, it's supposed to keep you uncomfortable. This shot design continues to the next scene. We actually see the girl, Nurse Ratchet, someone will come to know. She's walking down the hall. Again, it's a long shot, and she's walking, and her three black boys, that's what I'm just gonna call them, the three black boys, tell her hello, and we go into the hospital. The movements, everything seems to be working as a cog. Everything is orderly. It's been done 1,000 times before. Why make it any different? And to boot, we see how the patients are being treated off the jump. Not overtly bad, but they are also being quite dismissive, pushing them without any type of protest, telling them what to do with any type of protest. There's a lack of better words. Nobody makes a fuss. Then finally we get to see who's in the car from the beginning. It's a man named Randle McMurphy. See, Randle is a little different from everyone else. Everyone else seems to actually be there for a good reason, one way or other. They may have some mental issues that they probably need to be there for. Not Randle. No, Randle is just there because he wants to get out of some jail time, and he's only acting crazy. Something we'll see more of what he's trying to do, and I think this is a brilliant acting, performance, because he's meant to act crazy, not act crazy, if that makes sense. Like, he is literally trying to act crazy. He's trying to come across as if he has something mentally unstable about him. But no, he's just acting, and everybody can tell from a mile away. Later on, we come to learn that McMurphy was sent to this location because of some troubles with the law, one of which being statutory of a 15-year-old girl, who he claims said she was 18, but does that really make a difference, Randle McMurphy? Does that really make a difference? From the start, we are shown that McMurphy is an asshole towards patients. He takes mental issues very lightly and is a borderline pedophile, is disruptive, and is an asshole. I think I said that. He's an asshole. McMurphy then attends a meeting with those of sound mind. They call this a therapy session, but in reality, it's just a head nurse airing out dirty laundry to the other patients. And upon first watch, I actually didn't really understand it fully. Like, I knew it was great acting. I knew it was superb direction, or the director had good direction. The movie, everything was great, right? But upon second watch, having to watch this again so that way I can write the script, bro, this is one of the best scenes in the film. Let me break it down for you. So, Nurse Ratchet is not as good as she comes out to be. I think we all know that. Nurse Ratchet is the villain, the antagonist, the bad guy of this movie. She is simply a tool for the mental institution, and thus she is quite by the book, without much freedom. However, she has found a way to use her authoritative powers for her own bidding and enjoyment. Knowing that these patients aren't mentally well, she forces them to talk about things that stress them out, that make them sad, make them mad, make them anxious, creating a domino effect of chaos that would normally go unnoticed. But here's the twist. McMurphy is just fine. McMurphy locks eyes with Ratchet. He's soaked in all the chaos that she feeds off and really sees through her. And then she really sees through him. They are the same size of the coin, or the opposite sides of the coin. And her smile, however subtly, falls softly, and the change is barely visible. It's fire. I love it. It's just a genius scene filled with great acting, amazing direction, and even better storytelling. We know that McMurphy isn't one for rules, as he's been in prisons multiple times before. We know he's quite good at reading people, as he's become one with the hospital in mere seconds. So of course he'd be able to see right through her and hate every fiber of her, considering that she is the exact opposite of his natural tendencies. Pasiri, that's a damn good point. And let's continue the movie. So in the next scene, we actually see McMurphy and his crew, or whatever. I guess the patients have like outside privileges sometimes. Maybe the sound mind do, and so they're playing basketball. And of course, when he goes out there, it's a normally very docile environment. But of course, when he's out there, it's chaotic. He gets on the man's back and starts running around the court, and he's McMurphy's just insane, okay? And he's telling this dude who is docile, mute, and deaf to dunk the ball because he's like 6'6", and he's like, come on, do it, buddy, do it, just do it. Like, literally, it's like a 5-minute scene of him doing that. And of course, Nurse Ratched stares down with her cold stare and disapproval because she likes an orderly and organized cogged system. And in the very next scene, we actually see that McMurphy and the boys are playing, I guess they're gambling. I'm not sure what they're playing, but they are betting their cigarettes instead of money. And that's when the music gets much too loud. And so McMurphy says, fuck it, I'm gonna just get up and I'm going to turn the music down myself. And that's when the nurses shoo him out of the nurse's office. And can I just stop and say that I fucking hate this nurse. Oh my god, bro. Every time I'm editing and I see her stupid fucking face, it makes me want to just choke her out. Nurse, I gotta even look. I don't even know her fucking name. What's her name? Nurse Pillbow. Stupid fucking. Let me chill out. But I do have it's something that has been smoldering inside of me, this hatred. Everybody looks to Nurse Ratched as if she's the worst. Bro, this nurse is so fucking annoying, bro. I understand she's working in a mental institution. Let's be real. She is a nurse, and so she should be able to know if someone is faking their diagnosis. This can't be a once in a blue moon thing. I feel like plenty of people try to get out of prison time by trying to remain mentally insane or something, clinically insane or cognitively impaired. I think that is the word to use. And so when she reacted that way, so for reference, there was this time in the movie where McMurphy went into the nurse's office and tried to turn down the music, and she was very much afraid of him. She said, "Oh my God, what are you doing in here? Oh my God, stop it, get out of here." And McMurphy's just like, "I was just trying to turn down the music. I'm just trying to," and then Nurse Ratched comes in the middle of them. She's like, "You're not supposed to be here, sweetie," and talks to him like a child, right? From that moment further, I finally realized she was a character, and I kept staring at her. During the therapy sessions, Nurse Ratched would just be saying such crazy things. Like, Dale Harding, one of the characters, would literally be like, "Oh my gosh, my wife cheated on me." And then she'll gaslight him and be like, "How do you know that? Is it because you might be mentally impaired? Have you never thought about that?" You know, something like that, right? And then you would just see her off to the side, staring straight at Nurse Ratched. She's such a fucking sheep. She won't even look at the patients themselves. She would just look at Nurse Ratched. And then, Lord, she pisses me off. I just had to let y'all know. She absolutely annoys the shit out of me. Anyway, McMurphy actually is shooed out of the nurse's office, and then he goes around and politely asks if he could turn down the music. And of course, Nurse Ratched says no, it's not just for him, it's for everyone. Now, this may be cool on paper. This might be very, yeah, it makes sense. It's literally like 9 of sound mind, and the rest of them, they don't even know where they are because they are so out of it. And so her saying that, yeah, it's like, yeah, this is for everyone, it's equal. But deep down, she just wanted to mess with McMurphy. She liked seeing him in displeasure. And I believe this is where it all started. Her hatred. Like, I think when she was staring at McMurphy in that basketball court, her mind was coggling. Her mind was like, yeah, I'm going to make him to be a cog worth being in this, you know, in this mental institution. And so I believe this is less to do with the patients, and it was just more to kind of make us understand Nurse Ratched on a deeper level. She isn't such a good nurse, more so she uses her authority to get what she wants. And I think that is basically what it is. And it makes her even more terrifying as she says all this with a crystal clear smile. She then tells him to take his meds, and so he does. seemingly. That he walks back without turning down the music. McMurphy goes down and says how much he hates Nurse Ratched, and that he creates a bet saying that he will actually be able to make him leave. He's going to dethrone Nurse Ratched. Just give him a week. And so the bet is on. The very next day, McMurphy is at yet another therapy session, and this time he actually participates instead of just laughing and smiling and looking around. He actually goes up and says, hey, we should go off schedule and we should definitely watch the intro game for the, I guess, like a baseball game. I don't really watch baseball, but it was like the All-Stars game, right? And so she's like, no, but puts it up to a vote. And I think she does this just to kind of power flex, to be honest with you. She knows that the patients are scared of her. So it's really only McMurphy and I think Charlie, because Charlie's the fucking best. And so he gets pretty upset and he wants that TV on, right? But she continues to belittle him, continues to talk to him as if he's a child. And I think that's one of the bigger things that make Nurse Ratched so dislikable and so scary, is that she can say all these things with a smile on her face. She can demean you with a smile on your face. Hell, she could probably spit in your face and you can start questioning if she's being nice or not. Like, she does all of these things with a smile on her face. But McMurphy is a spiteful asshole. And so when not getting what he wanted, he basically gets very frustrated, but does a power trip of his own. He does three things. He goes up to the TV that's not on and he starts making a ruckus. He starts narrating a imaginary game. The patients come by and they see this. They think this is fun. It's out of the norm, right? So they join in, and Nurse Ratched can't control them. The reason why I say this helps with three things is that this shows he's not afraid of her. He's not going to become a cog like she truly wants him to be. Two, it helps the patients become more human and realize that their everyday life was a bit more demeaning than they ever realized. And then the third thing, she, for the first time, could not control something within that environment. Even still, despite his big boy play move, he's still pretty mad. He still really wanted to watch the baseball opening series, and so he tells the patients, man, fuck this. I'm going to pick up this, I think, control panel. I'm going to pick it up, carry it to the window. Damn, slow down, motherfucker. He said he's going to pick up this control panel. He's going to carry it to the window. He's going to slam it right through that fucking window. And he's going to walk his ass down to downtown to whatever bar. He's going to sit down with some ladies, have a drink, and watch this damn baseball game. And so he bets on it. Gives the bets on it. He says, if I can't do it, let's bet on it. Harding, of course, puts $20 down on it. And he can't do it. But then he leaves the room with a lasting statement. Well, at least I tried, goddammit. At least I did that.
The next day, yet another meeting is being held. This time, it's aimed at Billy. Wait, I haven't even introduced the characters that matter greatly to the story. Let's get them out of the way before continuing. So let's start with Billy. Billy is a young man with a stuttering problem. He also seems to revert back to his boyish state when his mother is mentioned, and also has a history of self and suicide attempts. Another interesting fact is that Billy's mom and Nurse Ratched seem to have been, or are, close friends. Next is Harding. He seems to be of sane mind compared to the others. He speaks well, he has good motor skills, but really only seems to have paranoia issues, as he believes and suspects his wife of cheating on him, and apparently according to the wiki, he's a repressed homosexual. See, I watched the movie first, as I said, and that did not come across. The only mention of him being a homosexual, if you read in between the lines, is they make fun of him and he's like, oh, you think this is funny? You think I'm just a little gay dude? Tee-hee-hee, right? So that was the first mention, and I was just thinking, yeah, that's probably what they're thinking. Exactly, that is just what they are thinking. It's not true. And then it was the fact that he couldn't please his wife sexually. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be gay. You could have just fallen out of love. But reading the book, no, he's gay. Reading the book, it is first stated for a fact he is gay. And he was only there because he didn't want to face his marital problems. And that is really sad to hear. But yeah, I just didn't catch that the first time. The repressed sexuality thing won't come into play until longer into the video or further into the video. So, but yeah, no, Del Harding, intelligent guy with a cute face, beautiful wife, but he can't please her sexually. And so people call him a homosexual. So, yeah, that sucks. Anywho, next we have George, a germaphobe, who is a World War II vet and was the captain of the ship during this time. He struggles with PTSD, I believe. Next we have Charlie Cheswick. Charlie Cheswick is someone who looks up to McMurphy as his voice. He lacks the courage to tell Nurse Ratched his true feelings, so he uses McMurphy as his voice. You would start to understand this more when watching the film. He starts off cowering in front of Nurse Ratched, but is also the first person to speak up against Nurse Ratched. So, and that kind of corresponds well with the source material, because I believe in the books he was also someone who did not like Nurse Ratched but lacked the courage to actually do so and say so. And tragically, when something happens later down the road, we won't even get into it. Next we have Martini. He is a small dude who likes to say, "Hit me."
Hit me. Shut up!
Funny thing is, I didn't even know he was a small dude the whole time, and then I saw him walking down this corridor in one scene, and I was like, what the fuck? I was like, he is so short. I said, that's so fun. Chief is another really big important character. As I said, I think Chief, he was the first patient to have been there long before anyone else, but before anyone else, Nurse Ratched was there as well when Chief had arrived. So she's been running Honcho for a long time now, but he seems to be suffering from delusions, but he fakes his insanity in that department of being a mute, deaf, and docile, just so that way he can just mop and stare and observe. And honestly, that's pretty much the only people I'll focus on. There's more people, of course, but a lot of them are non-responsive or just don't hold much meaning to the story. Wow, Passiri, that was very informative. Thank you very much. Funny thing here. Remember that whole scene I was talking about with McMurphy walking away and storming off and talking about an imaginary ball game? Yeah, that just didn't happen yet. I actually don't know how I got that information, but I digress. Everything that I said in that scene is completely true, except that it happens now. It happens, I guess, when everyone votes. Essentially what happens in this scene is McMurphy, I guess, inspires the other patients enough for them to actually pull up their hand and vote to put the ball game on and, you know, disrupt the schedule. However, it's more, like I said, there's more unresponsive patients than there are sound mind. So it's like, no matter how many of them voted, because they all voted, it doesn't matter how many they voted for, they all will never be able to have the majority win rule thing happen, right? And so McMurphy runs around trying to find the one person to tip the scales, essentially. And when she finally does it, he runs to her and he's like, yo, like, we won the thing. This is like, we won. You should put it on right now. And then that's when she tells him no, and the whole thing happens, right? And then we snap back to another part of the day, I guess, where McMurphy is now becoming evaluated once again. And the doctor's like, hey, I don't think you're actually, you know, I don't think you should really be here for real. I think you're just trying to get out of the prison time. And so for McMurphy to continue staying there and not going back to the work farm, that's what they refer to his time, the work farm, he basically says, all right, they want crazy, I'll show them crazy. And so he grabs Chief, tells Chief to just stand near the fence, right? Because this is during the outside privilege time. He's like, you stand right there. He climbs on Chief's back, climbs over the fence, and hides into the bus. And when, I think they watch a movie every Sunday or something, but when all the sound mind come out and get on the bus, he's waiting there in the driver's seat, and then he just dips. He basically kidnaps all of the patients and takes them on a fishing trip. Of course, not before stopping by and grabbing a prostitute on the way. And when they're out, I kept thinking they were going to injure themselves, that something bad was going to happen. But I think there's a wholesomeness in McMurphy's attitude towards mentally ill people. he doesn't treat them any different. Like I said, what made him an asshole in the beginning of the movie now somehow makes him out to be like a wholesome character, someone that you kind of look up to. Obviously, statutory rape of a 14-year-old girl, 16-year-old girl. Never forget, never forgive. However, in this one scene, it was quite cute where he was out there showing the patients how to put bait on the line, and I kept thinking, oh, a fucking hook is going to go right through their thumb, and then he's gonna come back, bring them back bloody and bruised, and everybody's gonna be like, look at you, you're crazy. However, no, everything went off without a hitch. You know, he let Chesquig and Harding stir the boat. He let everybody else catch these ginormous fish. Everything went well. Everything went well. But everyone else saw something completely different. They thought, instead of crazy, he seems to be dangerous. And so they think it's better to just not to endanger any other patients' lives anymore. And they think it's better to just put him back to the work farm. And this is when Nurse Ratched shows her true color. Take it away, Pass Yuri.
But Nurse Ratched doesn't like sending problems to other people and believes that sending him to the Disturbed will fix him. Or at least that's what she says. As I said, Nurse Ratched is quite tricky. She always says one thing, but underneath has an entirely different motive. She knows that she has a great reputation in the medical field. She knows that if she says she could fix him, they will listen. She knows that for a fact that this man is not
cognitive impairment.
Even still, when presented with a chance to get rid of her one problem, she chooses to let him stay. She chooses revenge.
And as Past Yuri said, it's all true. She chooses revenge, and shit hits the fan. He gets into a little spat with one of the black boys, and he's like, I'll see you on the outside. You know, like he's basically saying he's gonna fight him. You keep treating me like shit, I'm gonna fight you and now get out. And what I think his name is Washington, the black dude. He's like, you ain't getting out of here, sucker. Like, you're here until we let you go. And so this is all news to McMurphy. So next time they have one of their therapy sessions, McMurphy has a question. And this time it's legit. He's like, why is it that I'm only now hearing that I'm able to only leave when you tell me to do so? And he starts getting mad at everyone else. And this is when it comes out. Nurse Ratched explains that mostly everyone in that mental institution is there voluntarily. Literally only 3 people out of that mental institution, which that being Chief, McMurphy, and I think some other dude, I can't remember his name. They are all there, or everyone else other than them are there voluntarily. And it kind of steamrolls because after being asked this, Nurse Ratched actually throws this question to the other patients. And instead, the patients don't really care about what McMurphy's talking about, but instead why certain things are the way they are. Why can't they have their cigarettes, where the cigarettes have gone? Why are certain doors locked? You know, things like that. It shows how programmed they are into wanting the most trivial things. But this is just the catalyst of something insane. Cheswick, usually a pretty nice guy. He's asking Nurse Ratched why is it that he can't have his, cigarettes. And she talks down to him, because I also feel that Nurse Ratched is feeling the pressure of losing the organized environment that she so loved. And so she snaps at him. Sit down, she says, right? He sits down, but his question goes unanswered. So he stands up again. Hey, I asked you a question. She says, sit down, and then I'll ask you a question. He started yelling, but then she tells him, I'll answer your question once you calm down. He calms down, and yet she still doesn't answer the question. She says, since you guys have gambled away your cigarettes, now we have a shortage of them, and we're only going to allow you a certain amount of them. This pisses Cheswick off, because Cheswick is like, I'm not a fucking child. I can demand my own cigarettes whenever I felt like it. I could leave this place whenever I felt like it. I should be able to smoke whenever I feel like it. Okay, he starts screaming about how he's not a kid and how this isn't fair and how this is all pretty much bullshit. And no one wants to fix the problem. And so Nurse Ratched actually calls for one of the nurses or one of the black boys to come and handle the situation. And they start handling Cheswick, not like a patient, but more like they're arresting him, right? Grabbing up on him. And McMurphy is seeing this and is like, yo, chill out. He's cool. And he's screaming about he wants his cigarettes. He doesn't want anyone else's. He wants his cigarettes. And so McMurphy said, fuck it, I'll do it. Punches through the glass and grabs himself a cigarette. I think he cuts himself like IRL because anyway, and then he hands the cigarettes to Cheswick and they're still being really, really rough with them. He tells them chill out until they shove him. And then they get into a fist fight, right? He gets into a fist fight. He actually starts losing, unfortunately. But that's when Chief comes in and grabs the man off of him. He starts body shotting that nigga. I was like, oh shit, they really fighting. Anyway, all that fighting makes them go to the Disturbed. And things only get worse from there. As they are in the Disturbed, they drag Cheswick away. He's screaming bloody murder and they forcefully sedate him. What? Insane to me. I just was watching this like, wow, you literally can't do that in this day and age. Like, I think they have certain laws that have erected themselves into the medical fields because of shit like this. You cannot forcefully sedate someone unless you have like a super legalized reasons to do so, and it's a lot of legal things that you have to go through. But anyway, they forcefully sedate Cheswick, and that's when McMurphy and Chief share gum, and Chief fucking speaks. He's like, what the fuck? It's like actually a really funny scene. That he basically learns that Chief has been faking being mute, deaf, and docile, and outsmarted everyone basically. And that's when McMurphy basically says he doesn't belong here. Chief and him do not belong here, and that they need to leave now. And so right before carting off into another room, he tells Chief, we'll get out of here. But of course, when going into that room, he has a session of electrotherapy. It's actually better known as electroconvulsive therapy or electroshock therapy. It's a lot of different names. What can I say? Anyway, Past Yuri's going to tell you all about it. Give him a listen.
Now, I'm going to stop the video here and pretend that you guys haven't been thinking about such topics for 24/7 for the last 2 weeks. So, what the hell is electroconvulsive therapy? And why the hell do we use something like that? Well, in modern medical world, the electroconvulsive therapy is still very much used. It's mostly used on patients with severe depression or major bipolar disorder who haven't responded to any other treatment. It is literally a last resort. Essentially, it uses small electric currents to induce a controlled seizure in the brain while the patient is under anesthesia and generally looked to as quite safe. The problem was, along with other treatments used in these mental institutions during this time, was that these were very legit treatments but just used in the wrong situations and without the proper care needed. Electroshock therapy was often used on patients who were fully conscious multiple times a week. This is extremely painful. I mean, you are shocking the brain after all. Mental institutions didn't stop there. Hydrotherapy was used on patients, and again, a very legit practice, but oftentimes were used in cruel manners, wrapping patients in wet blankets for long periods of time, dumping cold water or even spraying cold shower heads onto their patients, forcing non-consenting patients into tubs, and this one got me most. They would hold patients underwater until they lost consciousness, and if they were brought back, they were apparently cured, calling it the water cure. Like, what? What? And of course, amongst these practices, everyday human rights were being vandalized. These places had lack of correct hygiene, over-reliance on physical restraints, overcrowding, and a lack of individual treatment. And yes, the practice of lobotomies were used as well, but we'll get into that much later. It was a shit show.
That was a very good explanation, Paz Yuri. Thank you for that. Moving forward into the movie, we actually have like an undisclosed amount of time that passes, and there's yet another therapy session. and in comes McMurphy. This time he's shimmying and decides to play a little prank on everybody on that wing and act as if he's gotten lobotomized or he's gone brain dead from the electrotherapy. And of course it was just a little jokey joke, but that can't mean anything else, right? Right? Anywho, later that night, we see that he is up late at night, everyone's gone to sleep, and he seems to be crafting up a bit of a plan. The person who watches over all the patients at night goes to walk out the last nurse. I think that's stupid. You're about to make me say something I'm gonna regret. I think he's walking out Nurse Pilbo. And so McMurphy takes that time to sneak into the nurse's office, go onto the phone, dial in the number, and he calls Candy, the prostitute from earlier, and tells her to bring a +1 and to bring some alcohol. What's he planning? What's he planning? Well, we get to see what he's planning. Just like Nurse Ratched, McMurphy's actually a very calculating guy. He's a very manipulative person. I think he understood that this black dude, this dude who watches over the patients at night, is a lonely, perverted old man. And so he brings some prostitutes over, and when he comes to stop him, he promised him fun, alcohol, everything that he could ask for. And stupidly enough, the old man lets them in. And of course, that was all just a facade, because truly all McMurphy wanted to do was to throw the patients a Christmas party with alcohol and dancing and girls and even a more tender moment. But of course, the night won't last forever. And so he goes into the nurse's office, picks up a key, and begins to open up the window, saying it is his time to depart. He and Chief are gone. However, right before leaving, he's saying bye to everyone and getting candy and the +1 and everything else. Billy seems to be taking it quite hard, and nobody really knows why. So McMurphy goes over, he's like, what's going on? He's gonna miss him. He honestly just comes out and says it. He's going to miss McMurphy. And when McMurphy said, bro, you can just come with us, obviously Billy says he's not ready yet. So McMurphy comes to an agreement saying, hey, I will send you my address when I make it to Canada, and that way when you are ready, you can come find me. And that's when it all comes out. Billy then asks if Candy is going to be there. And of course, he says, yeah, she's coming with us, of course. And then he puts 2 to 2 together, knowing that Billy has a crush on Candy. And so he says, dude, you want to go sleep with her? You want to date? Take it. Do it. Lose your virginity. Now, I know that seems a bit crude, but it is McMurphy we're talking about. And also, it's been shown throughout the whole movie that Billy seems to have his stuttering problem and his self-harming tendencies all seem to play a part in his views on women. He's scared of women. Last time he asked a woman to marry him, she ghosted him, and that's probably why he harmed himself. His mom scares the living daylights out of him, and he is absolutely terrified of Ratched. So it's all tying back to this woman problem. So doing this would help him solve that fear of his, that phobia. And yeah, he has sex with her and does a pretty good job, it seems, because he's found cuddling her in the next day. So you really don't get that far if you've done a bad job. For whatever reason, McMurphy and Chief didn't leave in the nighttime, and well, Nurse Ratched comes there in the morning and is pretty angry. She's very angry. Tells her black boys to go around and check to see if anyone's missing, and of course no one's missing, but the way they wake him up is quite aggressive, quite like police dealing with criminals, it's not like a patient. It's weird. The only person who's missing is Billy. As I said, Billy had clapped those cheeks and was still there cuddling her. In the morning, he runs out and is super proud of himself. Everyone applauds him. It's a happy moment. Truly it is. And this is the first time that we don't really hear him stutter.
Aren't you ashamed?
No, I'm not.
His stuttering problem is gone. He's smiling. He's happy. He's good. But just as Nurse Ratched is very similar to McMurphy, She knows what buttons to push. As soon as she mentions his mother, it was all over from there. Everything that he just did, all that growth, all that character development, down the drain. He goes right back to his boyish state and pleads and begs for her not to tell his mother. And of course, she ignores him. Like she hasn't learned her lesson before when Cheswick was ignored. He becomes manic. He goes from pleading to just straight up anger. And then, surprise, surprise, when Nurse Ratched put him and isolated him in a nurse's office, a commotion could be heard off screen. The commotion off screen was Billy killing himself. Despite the warnings, despite knowing, despite all the information you could ever have as a nurse, Nurse Ratched failed Billy, isolated him after pushing him into a manic episode, and he killed himself. Blood all over Nurse Pilbow. She comes running out, collapses into her arms, and everyone can only know one thing. They all check, they all gasp, they see his body. McMurphy had a chance to escape. He had the window open, he had the opportunity to leave, and yet he could not help himself. He must see what happened. And when he did, he saw Billy's lifeless body and blamed only one person. Nurse Ratched had pushed everyone out of there and said the only thing left to do at this point is to go back on schedule. There's nothing more we can do. We just have to move forward in an organized manner. He fucking broke. He attacked Nurse Ratched. He choked her, strangled her. He wanted to kill her. Everyone pleaded for him not to, and yet he gave in to his tendencies, into his anger, until he was subdued. After another undisclosed amount of time, we see everything has gone back to some form of normalcy. The boys are playing cards again, they're gambling as well. Nurse is now wearing a neck brace, and everything seems to be calm and tranquil. We then see Chief Broman. He is laying at night, staring at the ceiling, waiting for McMurphy to come back because he had promised that they would get out together. And he did that same shimmy he did earlier in the movie, except this time it was real. There were nurses with them, having to help him down on the bed, and Chief Bowman didn't really notice anything until he walked over. And when he did, he had noticed that McMurphy had been lobotomized.
Lobotomy had been incredibly popular in the 1930s, largely due to the work of the Portuguese neurologist Antonio Egas Motes, now hopefully I said all of that right, who pioneered the procedure. It was at a time where the mental health had become mainstream and not many had any options for patients with these mental disorders. They originally believed this to be a quick fix to help the overcrowding at these mental institutions, calming them down and making them easier to work with, even if that means altering their personality and their mind. Through the 1930s and the 1960s, different types of surgeries would surface. The prefrontal lobotomy, where they drill a hole into the patient's head and sever connections within the frontal lobe. The transorbital lobotomy, which is the most infamous because of how barbaric it all seems. But it's when they'd access the prefrontal cortex through the eye socket and sever connections there. Topotomy, which the surgeon simply removes part of the frontal lobe, and this probably is what McMurphy had gotten in the film. And leucotomy, which the surgeon severs connection between the frontal lobe and the thalamus. The goal with lobotomies was to dampen emotional responses and outbursts by damaging the neural connections in the prefrontal cortex. However, lobotomies oftentimes cause death and devastating physical, mental, and emotional impairments. They were largely replaced with psychiatric medicine in the mid to 1900s. Another thing I wanted to point out before going back into the film is that, did you notice what I said earlier regarding the electric shock therapy? It was oftentimes used for
severe depression, or major bipolar disorder, but McMurphy are none of these things. At the very least, he could maybe have ADHD since he seems to lack a filter or just gives in to all kinds of impulses, or maybe he has anger issues due to his outburst and violent nature. But electroshock therapy should not be used for that. It's almost as if they're doing it to be cruel. If that's the case, it shows another bleak reality, as another terrible thing I don't often see people talk about is that people would often be omitted within these mental institutions for acting quote-unquote strange. That could literally just include a woman who maybe had just been on her period and is slightly more aggressive and agitated than normal, or homosexuality. They could have been on the spectrum, some form of autism, or something as simple as literally just being a tad bit antisocial. That's why overcrowding was such a problem, and lobotomies were thought to fix everything. Now, going back to the film, Chief seeing this is of course heartbroken, but for the duration of the film he's been nothing but an observer, and him seeing McMurphy fight the system and stand tall in the face of adversity, he feels as tall as a mountain. He would never leave the man that helped him so greatly to rot in a place like this, and would go to smother him with a pillow, mercy him. Then, with his large stature, he was able to do what McMurphy could not earlier in the film. He lifted up the heavy control panel and threw it through the window, and effectively escaping. McMurphy's soul with abdominal willpower and courage is transferred to Chief as he becomes the one who flew over the cuckoo's nest. See, this movie is fucking great. Sorry, what can I say? It's a great movie. It deserves the awards that it's got. It deserves the praise that it got. But as in the case with almost every single movie out there, the source material is just far superior. It sucks to say, but it is. Now, don't get me wrong, the movie has some aspects that I like more than the book. The fact that the actors were so masterful in their class. It made the movie, the idea, truly come to life. At uncomfortable moments in the movie, I truly felt for the patients. When the big reveal happened, when it transpired, I felt tears well up in my eyes. But when reading the novel of the same name, it became clear to me some narrative points simply didn't or couldn't be shown in the film, and that truly saddened me. Within the novel, it is actually in the perspective of Chief Broman, the huge half Native American guy. He is of a sane mind but chooses to seem like he is a mute, deaf, and docile patient, but it is quite observant and narrates his thoughts on the deeper workings of the hospital. In doing so, we are able to learn more things about the hospital as a whole, how some were treated before McMurray's arrival, the strange happenings that the nurses turn a blind eye to, and the cruel treatment some of the patients undergone. Shockingly, the book would go on to describe a patient who was of chronic status. Chief would explain that the ward was separated by acute and chronic patients. On paper, it was to keep everything organized, to keep everything in a segregated and safe environment, but Chief knew there was more to it. Chief knew that to separate those with sane mind and to use the chronic hall as a fear tactic. A good old be good now, otherwise you'll end up over there kind of deal. Another thing that the book really expands on is the introduction of McMurray. Within the film, it's all pretty quick. He comes in, makes a ruckus, and shows his dominance in action rather than in speech. But that's because a movie's runtime can realistically only be so long, and so it kind of has to hurry it up a little bit. But within the book, you have all the time in the world, all the time to digest every word that could be described for a certain situation that you are so looking for. Within the book, McMurray is described to be a man that sounds rough, sounds big, and even seems to talk down to the nurses and the attendees. Chief describes him to remind him of his father, a very to-the-point individual who is viewed as tough. This one thing the movie didn't do too well in my opinion. It hammered home in the book that almost everyone was delighted by his presence. He had a loud, guttural laugh that was so contagious that everyone else would laugh as well. He played along with the patient's antics and really melted the ice in literal seconds. In the movie, he's shown as this person filled with chaos, making a ruckus just because, but the books, he's shown to be more witty. It's a bit more crafty, funny, you know? There was a scene in the books where they were introducing all the patients that mattered. McMurray had asked who run things around here, and Billy pointed out to Harding since there wasn't really anything wrong with him. And the two's banter just showed how conversely intelligent McMurray truly was. He showed the other patients he's not afraid to clash with the nurses. He showed humor and care to those he were introduced himself to, showed a bit of invulnerability, and became head honcho in mere seconds. This is shown to be the case a bit later in the film, which I think kind of just works a little less well, just because I like that. The fact that in the book, for a solid 50 chapters maybe, or not 50 chapters, 50 pages, it just seems like Chief was just talking. Like, you literally start the book confused as hell, where he's like, yeah, man, went into the showers, and then 3 individuals came in, and he never came out, and when he did, he had eyes that looked blackened, and you're just like, what is he talking about? Then he starts going on, oh, this is the Combine, this is known as the Combine, and then, you know, and it also, that in itself is to help build Chief up to be this person that we are supposed to already be on guard with, because since he narrates everything, and since he's completely drugged up and also having own mental issues of his own, it kind of makes you wonder how much of this happened, how much of this truly transpired. Now, of course, the fact that the book was all narrated by Chief, the movie shifted perspectives to McMurray, and so many things had to be changed around, and also so many things also stayed the same. I'll go through them. For example, the betting on if McMurray could make the head nurse mad enough to just release him was a thing in both stories. Him faking the baseball game to the boys to get them all riled up as revenge to the big nurse was in the movie. But sadly, during the fishing trip, Chief, who had been in that hospital longer than any other patient, did not go on that trip in the movie. Within the books, we do get to read him experiencing the rush of it all, the breeze from the cold sea, how he was taught to put bait on the fishing hooks. It was so wholesome, and it was also meant to show Chief was beginning to get his life back at the place that took away from him. But sadly, in the movie, all we get is a smile, as he understands just how crazy and how free McMurray truly was. Like, it gets the point across, obviously, but it misses out on the Chief and McMurray bond that they truly needed for that film to really hit home at the very end. Another thing I really want to mention is the scene where Nurse Ratched is having their therapy session. And this also is when the topic of Harding's wife comes up and everyone begins to make fun of him. The book makes it much more clear that Harding is only there due to his views on himself. He knows that he has a pretty face, an objectively beautiful wife, and is disappointed in himself that he can't please her due to him having homosexual tendencies. In order to hide away from his marital problems, he'd much rather stay in an abusive environment with nurses and patients alike pestering him and bullying him about his thoughts about himself and his sexuality and his individuality. In the movie, we see this, of course, but it's just much less so. McMurray in the books damn near explains what's happening here, why the hospital is even allowed to be run this way. It's a brilliant conversation, but after the meeting, Harding is alone trying to remain calm. As they said, he's biting the inside of his cheeks, and that's when McMurray comes and calls the meeting a chicken peck. Apparently, it's when a chicken is covered in some kind of blood and is picked to death. Obviously, McMurray is calling the patients the blood, Harding the chicken, and the nurse herself is the one responsible for putting that blood there. Though at first Harding tries to deny it, he finally comes true to himself and says that there's not a man in this ward that does not think that Nurse Ratched is cruel, mean, and terrible, but they just simply fear her. He goes on to explain that the doctors here have absolutely no say. If she were to say that the doctor had some form of opium, it doesn't matter if she's accusing him, because she's not accusing him. Her status is so high within that medical field that all it takes is an insinuation and then it becomes fact. That's what makes her so damn scary. And firing her is just not an option due to the person who hires the nurses are good friends with Nurse Ratched, as they both served as army nurses together. This information is just not in the movies. It was something that I had always thought about when I was watching the movie. Was, okay, now are we saying that every mental institution out there is run this way, or is this just a crazy bad and one of the worst situations you can be in was a poorly managed hospital slash mental institution? And the book answered that right off the bat. It's because of Nurse Ratched, not the hospital, not their practices, mostly Nurse Ratched. Nurse Ratched has been bringing in people who she deemed can be fixable. Something that was very interesting that Chief would talk about in the book was that when people would come in, she would be delighted at an acute or a chronic, because then she could fix it and mold it into a cog that fits her world perfectly. And when it works out, it truly brought her delight. Not fixing them to get them out, but for them to fit in her world and continue the process just as normal. The ending is also quite different. Like, yes, McMurphy did get lobotomized, but there was a spiritual theme that went along with it in the book. The moment Chief Mercy killed Mac, he was able to find the strength to leave that place, almost as if the spirit had granted him the strength to do so. And the ending was a happy ending, right? He got out an abusive spot, you know. In the movie, he runs away in the sunset. We are left to our own devices on his fate. But he did just escape a pretty abusive environment, right? Hooray. Good, right? Well, with the added details in the book, not so much. Chief was omitted there for a reason. Actually, it's brought to our attention both in the movie and the film that there's only been 3 people in there that have absolutely no say whether they can go in or go out. It was Mac and it was Chief. And it was a third person, but I can't remember. But it was Mac and Chief. Everyone else, they could leave. They could leave, but they didn't. And so Chief was there for a reason. And also, since the entire book was in his mind, he was narrating, we know what's going on in that head of his. Like, literally one example of this being, he believes that Nurse Ratched has installed some devices that give the nurses some level of readings on the patients with how doped up they are. And when something gets a little low or one gets a little too little, she literally has buttons in the nurse's office where she will push it and vapors from the vents will come spewing out drug infested mist, and it will get everybody back on track. Is that really happening? Hell no. But it gives us insight that he is not well mentally. He's not dangerous, but there is absolutely no way for him to continue with life like normal. Not to mention the additive trauma from his experience there. It was also mentioned, and I don't know how factual this is because this was coming from Harding, a man who likes to talk. He basically said that with Chief, they electroshocked him. And maybe that's true, because when he went into the Disturbed in the movie, he didn't really flinch. He saw people getting carted off and he wasn't afraid, he wasn't scared, he knew exactly what was going on. He actually, in the book, explains what the electroshock room is. He said that people would go in there and it would be a lot of pain for maybe a day, but that shock would leave them in a daze for sometimes 3 days, and then they'll be gone for 2 weeks as they are set to recover. Definitely something you can gain trauma from. Even if it didn't happen to Chief personally, he's probably seen many people come and go and become vegetative stated people. Among other things, like characters like Ches being completely different and their fates being completely different as well. The one thing that I feel like the movie didn't quite gather was Chief Bowman's intelligence. So Chief Bowman Broman essentially referred to the entire workings of the hospital as the combine. That was the doctors, the nurses, the patients themselves, and that represented basically society. The reason why he called it the combine and how he thought it was societal, like it was a symbolistic, or it symbolizes society, was because he said that out there people come out a certain way, and with religion and churches or whatever type of beliefs you get into, or schools, it's basically to maneuver and correct your behavior into a more societal pleasing way, right? It's meant to oppress you or oppress a certain person into acting a certain way. And he viewed it just like how he viewed the hospital. The nurses, the attendees, the doctors, they fix all these patients and make them behave a certain way that they enjoy, that is easier for them. They oppress a certain person's. And another big thing that I don't think the movie really expanded upon was freedom. The One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is about freedom. You have three main people that represent a different type of freedom. So you have the patients. They literally have all the freedom in the world. They could literally leave that place if they so pleased. Most of them are there voluntarily. They do not need to be there, and yet they choose to because they fear the one that has taken their freedom away, both physically and mentally and emotionally. And then we have Nurse Ratched. She's the person taking everyone's freedom. Her freedom comes from oppressing others. That's how she feels alive. That's how she feels, how she's free to do whatever she pleases in that sense of the word. And then you have the one person who's largely not free. He's constantly always talking about escaping, but McMurphy himself is literally free. He's the most freest person in the story because he's able to just do. He doesn't need to think, he just does. If someone's asking for cigarettes, he'll punch the damn window open. If he thinks the music is too loud, he'll walk in there, turn it down himself. If he believes that he wants to leave all by himself, motherfucker, he could have done that. He had no need. When he climbed over that table, or when he climbed onto Chief's back and jumped the fence, he could have taken that bus and he could have just went to Canada like he said. Could have, but he didn't. He had all the freedom in the world because of his impulses, and yet that freedom cost him. It was no longer about his life that he was angry about. It was about the patient's life, or the patient's life, that were being stunted, that were not free. One thing that the movie did not do that the book did masterfully is to show the aftermath of certain things, right? After the whole thing with McMurphy becoming lobotomized and dying, and him escaping, or Chief Broman escaping, they actually talk about certain things that happen after the fact. An example of this being that Harding actually decided to enlist himself, or omit himself out of the mental institution and handle his problems. McMurray had the freedom to do whatever he wanted because of just who he was, but he was physically bounded and was not able to really become that free. He had the freedom to escape from that window, but he chose to go after and get revenge for Billy's death. Expanded upon in that scene, two things that actually really annoyed me, but one thing that really stuck with me is that in the book it was actually a lot more direct. The nurse shifted blame onto McMurphy. She looked up and saw Billy kill herself and said, "See, now this is your fault because you made him sleep with that woman," not taking responsibility. And that is exactly why McMurphy did that. He strangled her. But another big thing is that These two are polar opposites, and they cause each other's greatest demise. With McMurphy, he choked her, and due to that violent outlash, that physically took his freedom away. He was going to never be able to think freely. He was never going to be able to bathe himself freely, eat for himself freely. He couldn't do any of that. But within the book, Nurse Ratched lost her voice. The big nurse lost her voice. She could no longer speak. And so she lost the freedom to control. He lost the freedom to escape. She lost the freedom to oppress. It's beautiful writing. And I think that is the biggest thing that I didn't like about the movie. One thing that did stick with me is that these damn mental institutions, when I was reading the comments, because I was trying to figure out, have a second opinion if I was thinking about these things correctly, it's not that long ago. The mental institutions are still fucked. People say that what they saw in that movie truly resonated with them because it's shockingly too close to home. And hearing that actually made me just so sad. Just knowing that there were people out there who omitted themselves or had their parents omit them and were just in need of help and instead became victims. Drowning, drugging, physical restraints. It was this one comment that I had read in not spoiler, but content warning, because this is really sad, and take it with a grain of salt because it was just a random comment on a YouTube channel or a YouTube video. But this guy described his friend, right, having a mental episode, and so they physically restrained him and they put him in a room and they refused to let him out until he calmed down. But obviously he didn't calm down because he's in a fucking 4x4 room for an entire 3 days. And they refused to let him out until he calmed down. But obviously a 4x4 room, who the hell's gonna calm down? He's stressing out. And so when that didn't work, they took him into the psychiatric hospital and they tried to dope him up with treatment and drugs, and he basically didn't get the help he needed. And then they released him with more problems than he already had. And just 2 weeks later, he took his own life. It's stories like that that truly make me want to just harp on this dead horse. The stigma around mental illness is one where we are trying to correctly and educate people and into thinking a certain way and to getting them the help that they truly need. But we are still so far from it. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest did an amazing job portraying that. I feel like I always talk about games and I always talk about stories and games, and those are cool, it's fictional, but this was a very real psychiatric hospital. The location of which was taking place in the film was in Oregon. It was a true place that had terrible healthcare, terrible mental institution. There was no individual treatment. That was one of the major things you would see in the mental institutions at that time. You come in with all forms of different illnesses, and they will all give them the same drug that would just dope them out and reduce them to nothing but a shell of themselves. Anyway, like I said, that got me really emotional. So I'm gonna leave it here. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully next time it'll be something a bit more lighthearted and not so close to home. Goodbye, guys. Thanks for watching.